So I am recording now. So I'm going to ask you, can you please tell us your name and tell us a little bit about you so we can get to know you?
Okay. So my name is Eric A. Montgomery. I'm an attorney from Charlotte, North Carolina. I have been in practice for nearly 30 years, and I've worked for 3 Fortune 500 companies. I've been in private practice for the last 10 years and was appointed by the governor to the North Carolina Parole Commission back in 2017. So I've done a number of things and been involved in a number of diversity efforts over the years. So glad to be part of what you have going on.
Are you still on that committee that you joined in 2017?
Yes, yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about what that committee does?
So the North Carolina Post-Supervision Parole Commission is the body of the organization that deals with the parole of prisoners. And for those prisoners who may have been put on a post-supervision plan, let's say you committed a crime and the judge orders you to probation and requires you to have certain requirements, and you go out and get released and you violate that, those issues come back across our desk, and we have hearings to address those issues. So we can have the option of reincarcerating persons or put them on some additional terms to help them through their process. So that's a 4-year appointment from the governor's office.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes, but
Sure.
let me ask you this. In your practice, what type of law do you practice?
So primarily in my practice, I focus on the 3 main areas of practice are employment law, both from a plaintiff and a defense perspective. I also deal with estate planning issues for clients, and I also serve more or less as a general counsel to small companies. So I've got a number of business clients from A to Z, you name it, that I help manage all kinds of issues. So those are the 3 big buckets, and I also do personal injury. And so those are the things that I primarily engage in my practice.
So you really are busy.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So taking time out for me today was really a special treat. Thank you.
Always, but your family, so that's all good.
Absolutely. So I want to go back to your commission. So
Okay.
one of the things I have been trying to understand is recession.
Restitution?
There you go. When
Okay.
people have committed a crime, have had to pay back and then end up back in jail again simply because they can't not have paid. Can you speak to that?
Well, I don't know if people get reoffended because of failure to pay restitution. Most of the situations that we see are circumstances where they went out and committed the crime. I mean, so the restitution part doesn't really come into play from my viewpoint that much unless they owe some extraordinary amount of money back and they've got some kind of plan, they don't pay it back. But for the most part, the people that we see that are reoffending are not based on restitution issues. They're based on they going back out and they were dealing drugs before they go back to dealing drugs, or they get involved in some serious, assault, battery type scenario. But for the most part, restitution cases are not really sending people back to jail. That's not what, usually folk getting back and they're getting back into the drug game, or they're stealing stuff and they're breaking into places. That's what you really see.
Okay. Well, thank you for clearing that up for me.
Yeah.
So can you tell me what the racial makeup of your clientele are, and not necessarily your businesses, but your individual clients that you support? Can you tell me a little bit about the racial makeup?
In the law practice, you mean?
Yes, sir.
So I'd probably say 75% African-American, 20% Caucasian, 5% Hispanic.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
so, and in your law firm, your role is to be the defense or advocacy for that person.
That's correct. Depending on what the circumstances is. So, it may not be a litigious type scenario. It could just be a situation where, again, I do a lot of incorporations for business, help people set their companies up, help them draft contracts, review agreements, things like that. The estate planning side is, I'm preparing wills, power of attorneys, transferring deeds, maybe doing trusts. So it's more transactional work. So it's not necessarily an adversarial type scenario. So it just depends on the situation.
It makes perfectly good sense. And where did you go to get your Juris Doctorate?
I got my law degree at Marquette University, and I got my undergraduate degree from North Carolina Central University.
Okay. Can you tell me what is it like to be a Black attorney? Is it any different than a white attorney, or is it any different from any other kind of attorney?
I can only really speak to my experience because I'm in my skin. I can tell you, it's had its challenges, obviously. The biggest things that I tell people is, your success in large part is dependent upon your exposure, your experiences, and the connections you have. I mean, someone can be the smartest person in the world, but they don't have access to information or inside understanding of how things work. So, I mean, I've had a number of colleagues who are Caucasian who come from families where there's a second, third, fourth generation attorneys. I mean, I've got friends that their grandfathers were lawyers and they own buildings, and they have access to information. So that's, I was the first person in my family, to my knowledge, that went to law school. So everything I've done, I've had to figure out on my own. I've never had any real mentors in the law. No one really showed me the ropes. No one gave me any manuals as to how to get there. So every experience I've had to get in and stumble and fall and make mistakes and get back up and figure things out. And that's just been the nature of my experience. And, it is what it is. I don't complain about it, but I am realistic to understand and know that there's a lot of people who get work only because of their name, or they get work because of their exposure. It has nothing to do with them being good lawyers or good practitioners. It's Joe Smith's son, and his daddy was a lawyer, and we're going to support his son because we knew his daddy. And that's something I just don't have. So you just got to deal with it. It is what it is.
It is what it is. A lot of times we call that skin in the game. And I wrote
Absolutely.
a paper, I won't say who I wrote it for, but I wrote a paper called Minority Capital. And
okay.
it looked at the issue of the power, privilege, and esteem that you have acquired as a Black person.
Sure.
And then you put your name or your neck out there for someone to help them get a job, get a raise, something another.
Yeah.
And maybe for most white people, they can do that and make many, many mistakes. But for us, if you call up someone and say, hey, I really want you to hire Rochelle, and I'll turn out to be a bust, your capital decreases.
That's right.
They're going to trust you again to say, that last person you sent, she wasn't good. So, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you come across that, and I think for the most part, I haven't had any negative experiences from that. I mean, there've been a few situations where people you recommend for opportunities don't pan out, but again, they look at that as an individual situation for the most part. I mean, it's not really done any damage to me in that regard, but you just try to make sure you can vet people, and that's what I do. People come to me all the time and say, well, can you provide a recommendation or things like that? And I say, sure. And if I don't really know that person, I'm going to say, look, send me your resume. Let's have a chat, because before I put my name on the line for you, I need to know something about you. And I know you come to me recommended from somebody else, but certainly I need to know who you are, because, my name's on the line, and I don't want that to be a bad experience for either one of us. But, I do what I can to make sure I vet people and get information as much as I can, but there's no guarantee. You just do what you can do. And at the end of the day, for me, if I can help somebody who looks like me get into a place that they normally couldn't get into, I'm going to do it, and hopefully they pan out, and, and they don't, and we'll just keep the train moving. But look, I'm 54 years old. I don't lose too much sleep by that kind of stuff no more. I'm self-employed, and I'm going to do what I got to do. And I'm not too bothered by somebody else's circumstance. I'm going to do what I can to help people, and I'll do what I can to help get people exposed as much as I can. But after that happens, it's on them. They've got to make it happen. So
that's a very good point. Very, very good point. But it is a bit of a challenge.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you now have been in the law for 30 some years in Charlotte. You probably have a lot of prestige, and probably throughout the world, I assume. Have you ever felt your person unsafe? Have you ever felt like you would be in harm's way by someone who's supposed to protect and take care of you?
Fortunately, I have not had that kind of encounter. I mean, I've been blessed. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I've tried to position myself to be in the right place at the right time. And, a lot of times in life, circumstances, you could be at the wrong place in the wrong time. But I've been fortunate for that not to be something I've had to experience. I mean, I've tried to do the right thing, work hard, treat people fairly, and pray to get those things in reciprocation. So I really have not had a circumstance that I can think of that I had to be concerned about, whether it's physically or, professionally, in terms of my safety and my well-being. But, I know it exists, and certainly I've helped clients through circumstances like that. And I think, in large part, you just got to be prayed up and be prayerful about what you're doing, and hopefully, that you'll be blessed in the things that you do. But, I don't take life for granted. I mean, certainly I know, in a moment's notice, things can change, but, for the most part, I just try to keep a low profile and stay discreet in my business, and just try to do what I can to help people. And I think hopefully by helping people, it's helped me avoid, negative circumstances because they know my intentions are pure. I'm not in to help hurt nobody. I'm here to help people in every phase of my life as much as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let me just say you've been blessed if you have not, because I don't know if you watched Skip. His was the very first one, and he was my guinea pig.
Okay.
And I think the story he told was shocking because he had never told me this. And, we don't have any secrets between us. He tells me everything. I tell him on everything, and he always says I'm bothering him. But nonetheless, my darling husband tells me during our little chat like this that when he was young, he was surrounded by police officers with guns pointed at him.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know I don't know why that occurred. From what I remember from the conversation, he was riding along with some people, and I don't know what broken taillight or what, but something brought that about. I have a 21-year-old son and a 41-year-old daughter. My 21-year-old son drives 48 miles from his college to my front door and conversely.
Right.
The minute he gets in his car and says, "Mom, I'm coming home," I start praying until he pulls into the driveway. When he leaves the driveway, I start praying until he gets there and sends me a text or a message says I've made it.
Right.
Do you have children? Have you ever had any of those experiences?
Well, my kids are young, so they haven't started driving yet, but I know that's going to happen. My son's 14. He's itching to drive the car, and we've been trying to work with him. So, and my daughter's 12. So, I mean, that day is coming for us. I mean, we had a little bit of it because my son did go to boarding school a couple of years ago in Boston. And so there were times that he would be out on the weekends with other kids in the school. And I always made sure to tell him, I said, look, you always got to be aware of your surroundings. Make sure you always have on an article of clothing from your school so you can be easily identified. I said, because you're a Black kid, I said, and I can't take for granted that you won't run into some mess at some point in time. And fortunately, he didn't. But, I was always concerned on the weekends because I knew they would travel, but they were always, with for the most part, structured environments. But, there were times where they had free time. They could walk around the town and, outside of Boston and be on their own. And so I was always, thinking at those times, making sure he was okay and making sure we called the dorm at night to make sure he was back in because, the reality is stuff happens. And I'm not immune to thinking that my son's going to be completely free from any kind of harm and just stay prayed up that it never happened. Thank God it didn't. But, I think about it, and certainly it's beginning to become something that stays on my mind now as he gets older, and I know he's going to be wanting to drive and get out the house. And so, I know my time is coming to have that kind of concern on a more regular basis than I have to do right now.
Yes, sir, it is. And, we've been very fortunate this fall semester, our son will not have to go to his college. He can learn remotely. And we've been very blessed by that because he has an immune compromised system.
Right.
We even let him go out in the house unless we absolutely have to, because we're so afraid with COVID and all that stuff.
Right.
But let me change the subject for a minute. I'm going to play devil's advocate. So you are Mr. Chauvin's attorney. What are the salient points that make him innocent?
What did you say again now?
What are the salient points that make him innocent? That does not make him a murderer or manslaughter or whatever charge they may bring against him. I understand they've upgraded to second-degree murder. But what are the things that you do or you hear or you think that would make him come out not guilty?
Well, you got to look at the facts of the situation. And the person you're talking about again, which person you talking about now? Which person you?
The officer who had his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck.
The primary suspect, the primary guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a rough one. There's going to have to be some demonstration that at some point he felt like his life was in danger for him to take that kind of action. Obviously. I think as if I had to be his attorney, I mean, I have to take that posture to say, he did based upon his training and expertise to think that his life was somehow going to be in harm's way if he did not treat him in the manner that he did. And so we would obviously have to show that Floyd did something to warrant him taking that kind of approach with him. And obviously the argument that all officers are going to use is going to be qualified immunity, because under qualified immunity, they enjoy protections from being sued based upon their actions. And obviously, we're going to have to state and show some fashion that his actions were not outside of departmental regulations. They were warranted. They were approved, and therefore he should not be sued under the current circumstances. And so I think that's about as best any lawyer is going to be able to do to defend this guy. It's going to be tough.
Yeah. So let me take you back to Rodney King.
Okay.
I believe that was 1992. I'm not 100% sure, but it's been a minute.
Yeah.
So 4 police officers, but 2 mainly, beat this man to a pulp.
Yeah.
And somehow or another, the defense attorney got the case moved to another jurisdiction.
That's right.
And eventually all 4 men were acquitted.
Yeah.
How does the law do that? How is it? And I understand that, it's by who you put on your jury. It seems like the gentleman who was the prosecutor was very, very sharp. But how is it possible that they could walk away from that without any recourse?
Because in the DNA of America, we have a problem with convicting police officers. We do. It's just it's a systemic issue. It's not, it's everywhere. I mean, think about the fact that LA's got a lot of people of color. And those officers got off in LA. I mean, it's extremely difficult to prosecute an officer. Now, you can get a civil judgment against those cases. And I've had a case where we got a judgment. Well, we didn't get a judgment. We got a settlement. Some officers cost of the final line about 4 or 5 years ago. But in a civil case, understand, in a criminal case, the difference is you have to have a unanimous verdict in a criminal case. In civil cases, you don't have to have a unanimous verdict. So it can be by majority or by preponderance of the evidence. So it's a different standard. But in a criminal case, you got to have 12 people in the box all agree. And so that's where the difficulty comes in, because if you have anybody in a jury box who has a police officer in their family or military background, or which is invariably, you're going to have somebody with that kind of sympathy, with that kind of understanding. They're not going to ever convict a police officer because they think, the officer's lives were in harm's way some kind of way. The qualified immunity is going to come into play, and it's extremely difficult to convict a police officer. It just is. And if you look at the numbers in all the cases around the country over the years, convicting a police officer is next to almost impossible. It really is. So, I hate to think what's going to happen once they have these trials of these guys and the verdicts come out and the people are not going to like it. It's going to be a mess. We're going to have another Rodney King scenario again. Because I'm concerned that we're going to have some non-verdicts against these guys. I think the only person who might get convicted is going to be the main cop. I think those other 3 are going to get off. I really do. I think the guy who's standing up is going to get off. And I think the other 2 are going to get off primarily because I don't know how much you've read about their backgrounds, but those 2 officers had been on the force for about a year. So I think they were legitimately concerned about going against the senior guys, dictates in that situation. So, I think they were saying, well, look, if we get about this guy, and the guy's got his knee on the neck, he's telling us to stay here. If we move, we're going to get ostracized. We're new cops. So I think they were put in a bad situation. They were caught in a bad situation. And I think to a certain degree, based on what that jury looks like, they may have some sympathy against those guys. So, I think in my mind, my hunch is the only person who's going to possibly get convicted is going to be the main perpetrator. Those other 3, I'm going to be shocked if they do any time. I'm really am. It's just going to be, we're going to have a bad situation in our hands in America in a minute when those cases come to trial.
Let me ask you a question, which is more for me than anything is educational. So why is it, I understand the jury system is adversarial. You got a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and they are both arguing for their point. And supposedly the prosecutor is supposed to share everything with the defense attorney so that they can file an equitable trial. But why is it so much so that once a person is convicted, that the system is unwilling to reverse themselves? So I read Just Mercy by Mr. Stevenson. Right. And as I read these things, I'm sitting here thinking, you've got DNA that says this man didn't do that. And still a judge or a jury will say, no, that's not enough new evidence for us to overturn it. So what is the mechanism that makes it so difficult to get people who've been convicted, unconvicted, and even in some cases, paid, reciprocate?
Well, that's a multifaceted issue. So one of the issues you got to consider, think about this is that judges don't like to undo prior judge or jury decisions. So if a case has been tried to completion and a jury has made a determination, now you're coming back years later saying to some judge that now you should undo a decision that was rendered by people we've asked to give up their lives and time to sit in their jury box and make a decision. I mean, so that's the biggest overarching concern what the general public doesn't understand. I mean, so no judge is ever going to be anxious or motivated to come behind a prior case that's been tried to completion to just simply overturn it because of somebody's argument. That's half the battle right there. I mean, that's a huge part of what goes on. So you're saying that now that a jury and a judge and a whole group of people who tried this case years ago spent a month or two in trial to be overturned because someone made a motion. And that's what it boils down to. You know, if I'm a guy who's now been approached by someone incarcerated to say, look, my conviction was wrong, can you overturn it? Then we're going to do some research. We're going to file a brief into court and ask for a new hearing to be heard on that issue. And so now you're going to be coming back to a court of a different judge who's going to say, you're asking me now, the court, to come back and undo a decision that a judge and jury ruled on years ago. I mean, that's a tough undertaking. It's huge. And so the evidence has got to be ironclad. The information's got to be ironclad before they get to a point to make that kind of call. And so that's why it's very difficult. Those things are not taken lightly. They're not, and they shouldn't be, because, you know, you got people on both sides of the state. Imagine if your family, imagine if you were the mother of someone who was killed by this person. So, you know, you're going to say you want him to get out of jail now because y'all making a plea to the court. You're going to be mad as hell. And so there's going to be a whole group of people on the other side of the fence saying, you know, the prosecutors and the witnesses and people who are involved in the case who are going to be looking like, we don't want justice to be undone because we think justice has been served. I mean, so you got all those competing factors going on. And so you got that. And then you got, again, just the whole point of what does the new evidence show? And should it have been, you know, and does this new evidence warrant now being raised? I mean, those are all legal issues that they're going to stand there on 2 feet by themselves. I mean, so you got all those factors, and you got the politics of it all. I mean, so people don't think about that as well. I mean, let's say you got a judge up for re-election. I mean, so is he going to now open up some contested case that's, you know, the public has a certain view of in light of that circumstance, and he's got an election coming up within 12 months or so? I mean, all those things come into fruition. I mean, all those things are part of the decision-making process. I mean, so, you know, it's a lot of factors that go into those kind of situations. It's very complex. It's, you know, all those things, the political environment, the victim environment, has the media outcry. I mean, all those things are a microcosm of how those cases get put back on the docket. So that's very difficult to do. You know, when I commend, you know, Brian Stevens' work and, you know, the Equal Justice Initiative and things he's been able to do, because those cases are hard to overturn. And then you're asking the judge to come back and overturn some decision a prosecutor got was probably his boy. You know, it's probably somebody he drinks beer with, go to church with. So now you're saying, my friend was wrong 20 years ago, and now I got to undo this case. I mean, you know, and somewhere in backwoods Mississippi or Alabama somewhere, I mean, those are tough cases to undo. It's hard. So that's why it's hard to accomplish, because you got all those factors that come into that equation.
So if you go back to 1619 to 1954 Brown versus Board of Education, the number of Black people that were convicted or killed, Emmett Till, and all these things, and years later, either evidence has showed up or they've learned some new factor. This is 40 or 50 years later. And I can't remember the case I'm thinking about, but somewhere where a white, two Klansmen had killed someone, and many, many years later, they go back into court and found out that they lied. Everybody lied. The prosecutor lied. Everybody lied. Just evidence was withheld. That's the part to me. If what you said earlier about restitution and all that makes perfectly good sense to me. But what I don't understand is if I come to you, so you're Judge Montgomery, and I come to you and I say, Judge, I have this new evidence. The witness has recanted. I've got DNA evidence that says this guy wasn't there. I've got alibi witnesses who were in wherever, and they said he didn't do it. why wouldn't you even consider my case? Why is my case not relevant? I've got DNA, I've got alibis, I've got all this going for me, and yet still, we may put me, you may put my client to death, you may send
Sure.
him to life, so why is that?
Well, again, I mean, I think it all depends upon the circumstances of the day, what kind of pressure the judge may be getting or not getting, and whether or not he or she feels like it warrants to be reopened. I mean, so that's the power the judges have. The judges can make those decisions, and also if you don't agree with their decision, you can go over their heads and appeal it to some other body. But I mean, for the most part, I mean, that's the power judges enjoy. And so they've got to be convinced of the change in circumstances to warrant a new process. I mean, but that's the power of being a judge. They have that power.
Okay, so let's go further down this road. The number of Black and brown people in America right now, I think I read Black are 14% of the population and Latinos are 18%. So what is that? 30 something another, and the rest is white. Why is the number of Black and brown people incarcerated greater than the number of Black and brown people percentage-wise we have in our country?
Well, I think this pretty obvious. I mean, you think about the fact that we only have in the legal profession, there's only about 2 to 3% African American. So we only make up 2 to 3% of the lawyers, so we make up a less percentage of the judges.
And prosecutors.
Yeah, and prosecutors as well. And then the other factor comes into play, which we don't talk about. When you have juries picked for these kinds of cases, my experience has been, and I can't speak for the rest of the world, but I've been enough times in the court and seeing judges picking juries and all the Black folk trying to get off the jury. They don't want to serve jury duty. So how is a Black person or brown person supposed to get justice in America when his or her own people won't sit on the jury because they don't want to be tied up sitting in court for a week, possibly? I mean, so you want to be treated fairly and equally under the law, but your own people won't sit on the jury to make sure you get equal justice. I mean, that's a big issue. I mean, so you can go downtown to the Durham County Courthouse next week or whenever they open the courts back up and say, I want to sit in the jury pool. I want to observe how juries are picked for a week. And you tell me how many Black people, brown people are the first ones digging to the court saying, Judge, I can't stay, I can't do jury duty, yada, yada. And it's like, okay, so now, not until you're under the full weight of the law, you'll be wanting some fairness. I said, but, if you don't give it, you're not going to receive it. So, all those things are a factor. I mean, we don't sit on the juries. We're not the judges. We're not the defense. We're not the prosecutors. And so, you talking about getting justice, how you going to get justice? But the other issue is, we get started, unfortunately, put into the criminal justice system at much earlier ages than other people. So therefore, you come into the system with some limits on your record. More often than not, you're going to get a harsher crime because they're going to say, okay, you got a track record now doing this. Now, so because you started in 3rd grade, you get in trouble in school. Before you leave high school, you've been locked up once. Now you're on a pathway because once that's in the system, now you're marked. You're stained for life. To say that you step on a sidewalk wrong, you'll get locked up. I mean, so all those things are a factor in the whole process. So it's a mess. We got to overhaul our system tremendously in a good way. We have to do it because if we don't, it's just the trend's not going to stop.
Is it going to? Is there a way, or are there plans underway to revamp the prison from prison to home?
I mean, there are initiatives out there. I don't know if there's anything wholesale. I mean, but that's part of what's got to happen. I mean, I'm hoping that out of all the marches and the stuff that's been going on with the George Floyd circumstance, that there's some real reform that goes on in the world because we need it. It's desperately needed. It's just we can't continue on the way we're going because it's just we're creating another powder keg for our country down the road. Yeah.
So back to the jury part. So my son is 21 now. Ever since he's been 18, almost every 3 months, he gets a request to sit on the jury. Right. And of course, mom has to call the number at 5 o'clock or whatever time it is because he's in school, he's got class, he's away, and call. And so almost every time he's been asked, when we call the number, say, no, we don't need you, or no, we don't.
Right.
And I think a part of that is, first of all, if he were to sit on the jury, I don't even know if he could recognize what's just and what's unjust, because I think that part of the system is that although we invite people to sit on the juries, do they understand what this is? And so you hear this barrage of evidence from both sides, and you're sitting there trying to process it. And a lot of times I've heard from people who've sat on juries, I try to put myself in the place of the person who's been hurt or harmed. I get that, but let's not send anybody in jail just because we can, just because we aren't.
Yeah.
And I think your point is very important. So Vardir, tell me, so I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you get two passes, two people you can say, no, we don't want this person, or can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Well, I mean, so in court, you got two different kinds of challenges. You got what's called peremptory challenges, and you have challenges for cause. I mean, so a peremptory challenge, I can't recall the exact number that each side gets. It may be 6 or 9, but for peremptory challenge, a lawyer's not required to give a reason why they're challenging. They can just say, we don't want jurors 4, 5, and 6, dismiss them. Challenges for cause are those situations where there's a legitimate reason. It could be some relationship between the parties. It could be some, financial interest by a party or something like that would cause them to have to make a challenge against a particular juror. But, that's a standard fare for picking a jury.
Yeah. All right. Well, you have 5 minutes and they're all yours.
Okay. So what do you want me to say?
Whatever you wish to say. This is your 5 minutes. Just consider this your platform to get your thoughts out.
We've got a huge opportunity in front of us in America. And while I think the marches are great and all the protests are great, I think the things that we need to begin to focus on are things that have not been widely discussed in the Black community in the past, which I think we need to do, which is to focus on our economic strength. I had a law school professor at Marquette who said, do you guys know what the golden rule is? And everybody was chiming out. He said, no, y'all all are wrong. He said, the golden rule is those with the gold make the rules.
Amen.
And so we've got to understand that in order for us to make real change in America, we've got to become the owners. And we've got to stop being the consumers. I mean, I've been seeing things float around saying it's going to be, Black Tuesday, whatever. Not supposed not to shop plus certain places. But I've been trying to tell people, say, look, instead of taking that approach, why don't you just start buying the stock up? So if we want to make a difference with Nike, then instead of buying sneakers, if everybody, chip in $200 a year and buy up all the outstanding stock and become the majority shareholder, then we can dictate what Nike does. We can have Blacks on the board of trustees or the boards of these corporations, or have majority shareholders. I mean, one of the sad commentaries that no one ever talks about is the fact that despite all the money Michael Jordan has made in Nike, he's not even close to being a majority shareholder. He's not even close. He's not in the top 10, 20 shareholders of the corporation. I mean, that makes no sense. Just because he makes $100 million a year at Nike, everybody gets gets excited. But at the end of the day, they're making, for his 100 million, they're making 100 billion off of him. I mean, so he's still making money for them, more than he's getting in return. And so he has no voice in how the company goes or the direction. So it's like, what real power does he have? And so if we want to make a real difference in this world, we have to become the owners. We have to become the shareholders. We have to become fully invested. I'm convinced the only reason why Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, made a comment and statement that's changed his position is because he's got a genuine fear that there could be a boycott or strike by the players, and that's going to hurt the league financially. Mm-hmm. People who are in ownership positions only respond to their pocketbooks being hurt. All the social stuff is great, but at the end of the day, think about it. It's gotten real quiet again. People still march a little bit here, sparks here and there, but we have no unified plan of saying, okay, how are we going to make a difference financially? Bank of America announced they're going to donate $5 billion. Facebook said they're going to give $530 million to small business. And all those things are great. I'm not knocking them, and it's a wonderful thing. But they should have been doing those things. They should have taken somebody's death and the uproar to make it happen. But it's happened. We're here. But we can't be satisfied with saying, Facebook master did good by us. He gave us $500 million, or Bank of America gave us $5 billion, and we shouldn't protest. We shouldn't protest those companies. Again, look at Bank of America's board. They have no minorities on the board. They've got no minorities in the C-suite. They got no minorities in position to run the company. Why is that? That makes no sense. I mean, so we got to get smart and aggressive on the financial end. So once we can start making a difference financially, then you will see real change in America. But that's all they understand. They understand their pocketbooks. Until you hurt the pocketbook, you have an effect upon their financial resources, real change in America is not going to come. We're going to be back at the same spot again. Again, I hate to see when these police officers go on trial and the verdicts don't come out the way America wants them to come out. Minnesota may burn. Minneapolis may burn down. I mean, I hate to say it, but I got a real fear for that. So, we got to get smart about how we approach this situation. And marching is great. It's got a lot of people's attention. But now the real work comes into play, and we have to figure out how is it that we're going to be players in the economic mainstream. When I drive around Durham and Raleigh and Charlotte, I see all the cranes going up, all the pretty new buildings, and I say to myself, all this is great, but we have zero interest in any of it. We have no financial stake. There's hardly any minority contractors in Charlotte involved in any of these construction projects. I don't see any in any of these cities around the state. I mean, so people making millions of dollars to get government aid, government grants, and they're not being required to do anything when it comes to making sure minorities are part of the process. And that's a sad fact. I mean, so how are we going to change our position if we're not ever involved financially? We got to be involved financially in the growth of these cities. That's how we're going to make a difference. I mean, you can barely live in Charlotte now. I mean, I don't know what people who do have basically, $10 hour workers. Where do they live? They don't live in town. They live in Mooresville, take a bus into Charlotte because they can't afford to live in Charlotte. They're living down in Gastonia because they can't afford to live in Charlotte. So, what do they do? I mean, my parents' neighborhood was one of the oldest Black neighborhoods in Charlotte. Houses that used to cost $60,000, 3-bedroom, 1,500 square feet houses are now going for $250,000. Who can afford that? You just a working class person. How can you afford a house that costs $250,000? It doesn't make sense, but that's where we are. I mean, all the Black neighborhoods in Charlotte that are close to downtown, they have a view of downtown. Now, if you don't get it, they're going to be $300,000 and up. And people are moving in left and right. I mean, around houses around Johnson Smith cost $500,000, $600,000 around Smith. You can't even move in Smallwood now. They've been going in and paying cash for houses. They offer $40,000, $50,000 cash. They gut that in a week the house is torn down, and they got a sign up saying, "Yo, buy this house. This is 2,200 square feet on 2/10 of an acre, and it's $600,000. And Johnson Smith is in your backyard." Only because the downtown is you 2 blocks from downtown. So you 2 blocks from downtown, you won't pay $1 million in Charlotte. It's scary. Yeah, we're in a bad place financially. Yeah. We got to change that.
I absolutely agree, and thank you so much for doing this. When the video is converted, I'll send you a copy so you can look at it, review, and if you approve it, I will upload it. If you don't, we can do it again, or we can not do it at all. I'm gonna start recording just for a minute. So I'm gonna end the recording. I just want to talk to you just for a minute off the record.